Hi, my name is Rachel Paxton, and today I'm going to show you how to can winter squash. In this class, you will learn how to can winter squash. I'll lead you through the process step by step. I'll give you the recipe and canning supply list that you can download and print out for future reference. You will find those in your course materials, and you'll also gain the confidence you need to try more pressure canning recipes on your own. My name is Rachel Paxton, and I'm a freelance writer and mom of 5 children ages 28 to 6. This is me and my husband Dave. We've been married for 20 years. This is 3 of our children. Christian and Zachary are twins. They're almost 11. Trenton is 6. And we also have a 28 and a 26-year-old daughter. I've been canning for more than 20 years, and I'm the owner of the website creativehomemaking.com. This recipe is really easy. I use 2 to 3 winter squash. You can use as many squash as you want. You're just going to have to figure out how many jars you need. For 2 to 3 medium squash, I used 4 quart-sized jars. You'll need a pressure canner, a jar lifter, a wide mouth funnel, and about 4 quart canning jars. This is what a pressure canner looks like. You might wonder why you need a pressure canner to can squash. It's because it's a low acid vegetable. Anything that has low acid in it, which is almost all vegetables except for tomatoes, you need to use a pressure canner to can. There's a few exceptions to that. There's a few salsas that you can and other tomato sauces that you can can in a boiling water canner, but you need to follow an exact recipe to do that. But for squash, you definitely need to use a pressure canner because it's one of the most low acid foods that there is. So anyway, this is what my pressure canner looks like. It's a dial gauge canner. There are also weighted gauge canners, but I'm going to show you how to use the dial gauge. It's pretty common. If you don't already have one, there's a link on the supply list where you can order one from Amazon. They're about $75. If you don't have a canner yet, I recommend you get a pressure canner instead of a boiling water canner. You can use a pressure canner for boiling water or pressure canning. You can only use a boiling water canning for boiling water canning. So this one you can use for both. So it's a good investment. You'll also need a jar lifter. Wide mouth funnel is really handy. It sits in your jar so you can get the food in there without spilling. You need to sterilize your jars, rings, and lids in the dishwasher. You can reuse jars and rings, but you need to use new lids every time. I usually sterilize mine in the dishwasher. If you don't have a dishwasher, you can sterilize them in boiling water on the stove. The main thing is to keep them hot till you're ready to use them, so make sure if you do it in the dishwasher that they're hot when you're ready to use them. You want to fill your pressure canner with about 3 inches of water and get it started heating. You want to cut your squash in half and scoop the seeds out with a metal spoon. For this recipe, you need to peel the skins off of the squash. I wasn't sure how I was going to do this, but I tried the potato peeler and it worked just fine. The skin was really thin, so it came off easily. Next, you want to chop the squash into bite-sized chunks. Then place the chopped squash into a large stock pot and cover it with water. You want to boil it for 2 minutes. You're not trying to cook it, you're just trying to heat it. It needs to be heated when you put it in the jars. Next, you want to ladle your squash into your sterilized jars, leaving 1-inch headspace. The headspace is the amount of space between the top of the squash and the top of the jar. It's important to leave the correct amount of headspace because your food will expand when it's being heated in the pressure canner, and if there's not enough room in the jar, your jar can explode. So just make sure that you follow the recipe. Next, you want to fill the jars with boiling water, again leaving 1-inch headspace. Next, wipe the rims of the jars with a damp dish towel or paper towel and place the sterilized lids and rings on the jars. They just need to be finger tight. They don't need to be really tight. Next, you're going to process the jars in a pressure canner at 10 pounds pressure for 55 minutes for pints or 90 minutes for quarts. You might notice that the jars are not covered with water as they are in a boiling water canner. When you're pressure canning, when you start out with about 3 inches of water, it'll cover about half of the jars, maybe a little bit more. The water does not need to be covering the jars in a pressure canner. This is what a pressure canner looks like. After you put the jars in, you want to put the lid on and line up the arrows and lock it in place. Next, you want to turn the heat up on the stove onto high and take the pressure regulator off of the vent pipe. Pretty soon you'll see steam coming out of the vent pipe. When that happens, you want to wait about 10 minutes and then put your pressure regulator on the vent pipe. At that time, the pressure will start building in your pan and the lid lock will pop up. Then you'll also start to see the gauge moving and it will go up to 10 pounds. When it starts to get to 10 pounds, you want to turn your heat on your stove way down so the pressure doesn't get too high. You want it to stay right at 10, so adjust the temperature. It'll be between low and medium low until it stays at 10. If it goes below 10, you have to start your timing process over again, so make sure it stays at 10 and then set your timer. If you live at elevation 1,000 feet or above, you're going to need to adjust your processing time and the amount of pressure used in your pressure canner. So there is an altitude adjustment chart in your course materials, so reference that if you need to adjust those things. Otherwise, just follow the recipe. Oh, and after you are done timing, just turn the temperature off on the stove and let it sit. It'll take 15 minutes or so for the pressure to get out of the pan. So just let it sit. Don't move the pan or take the lid off. After the lid lock goes down, wait another 5 or 10 minutes and then you can remove the lid. Never try to remove the lid when the lid lock is up, or you could have an explosion. You don't want that to happen, so wait till the lid lock goes down and wait a few more minutes and then you can take the lid off and remove the jars. Use a jar lifter to remove your jars and put them on a towel on the kitchen counter. Let the jars sit on the counter till they'll cool. You might notice the water still might be boiling in the jars. It might take a while for them to cool off. As you can see in the photo, there's a lot less liquid in the jars than there was when you put them in the canner. The water evaporates while it's in the canner. Usually your jars will seal while they're in the canner. Occasionally they won't. It might take 10 to 15 minutes for them to seal. After you take them out, you should hear a pinging noise. If a jar does not seal, you can put it in the refrigerator and eat it within a week. The way you can tell if they're sealed is by pushing your finger down in the middle of the lid, and if your finger goes down and up again, it is not sealed. It shouldn't move when you push it down. And if it is sealed, you can store it in a dark, cool place for 1 to 2 years. This recipe was really fun. I'd never made this one before. I'm excited to eat the squash. It's already cooked, so you just need to heat it up. You can use it to make squash casserole, or you can also prepare sweet potatoes this way and use them to make sweet potato casserole, or you could also use them to make pie. So this was really fun. Sweet potatoes, or the squash, if you grow them in the garden, they will not last all winter unless you have a root cellar. I would love to have a root cellar, but I don't have one. So this is a great way to store the rest of your squash without it going to waste, because it'll last a long time this way, even till next year. So give it a try and see what you think, and I hope to see you again soon.